Hello and welcome everyone. In this tutorial we shall learn how to authorize the logged in users or the authenticated users that we have seen in the previous lecture to view their user profile data and not all the data by all the users. So let's flip over to Visual Studio, and the first thing that we need to do is to create a ID from the ASP.NET users table to this movie model, so that against that particular user from the ASP.NET users table, which was automatically created when you generated the individual user account template and when you did the first migration with the update database. So let's get going. So I'll put a public property over here, prop tab, and this will be a string because the ASP.NET users ID is also a string. It's a GUID actually, but that's a string itself. So owner ID. Now after having added this owner ID, so add dash or hyphen migration, extra column added in movies. Okay, and then click on enter. So you can see that the extra column added in movies, this is the name of the migration. It derives from migration and it has got an up method and a down method. So down method is for reverting any migration and up method is for forward going. So now if I update the database, should be able to see the extra column. So update database. So update database succeeded. Now if I right click on the movies table and refresh and then look at the columns, I can see the owner ID is there. Okay, so that is the first part over. Then we'll systematically edit first the movie detail, that is the child component, and then a few other steps which we'll cross the bridge when it comes. Okay, so first of all, let me close this unnecessary files. Now first thing is that I will need to open the components and movie details. Okay, so in this movie detail I have to add a few using statements. So I have to put a using statement below this Blazor movie app.models, and which will be just bringing if another library using Microsoft dot ASP.NET Core. ASP.NET Core. For some reason this IntelliSense is not working, but don't worry, I know it. Identity. Using Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.identity, and below the inject IJS runtime, I have to inject a couple of more classes or types. So this will be at inject. There is a authentication state provider. Okay, and this is the authentication state provider, and I will call this authentication state provider. So I will just copy, and the instance name is also the same as the type name for simplicity, and this and at inject again, and this will be a user manager. So user manager of generic type, and what is the generic type here? That is the identity user. So identity user, and I'll call this user manager. Now in here there was the handle valid submit which I have written earlier. If you go back to your old videos, you'll find that this handle valid submit was called. When was it called? It was called when the edit this form was first validated and it was then submitted. So I will have to modify this. What shall I do here? Now this part is okay. If movie object.id is 0, then here there will be a few lines. So I have them on my clipboard just to save time, and I will just explain what they stand for. So there is an auth state variable that I have declared, which is authentication state provider, that object that I have declared up top. And what does this do? This provides information about the authentication state of the current user. So I'll call this object of this type, and then I have applied this method get authentication state async. So this uses asynchronously, it gets an authentication state that describes the current user, and then use that authentication state to get the user. And then I pass in to the get user async method of user manager and pass in user object that I have created to get the current user, details of the current user, and then I get the current user ID with the current user.id. Okay, so if you look at this, there are quite a few properties. So this is the ID property, and this is actually which type? This is just a string, and this is the identity user. So if you look into these things, in the types that they are representing. So if you look into this authentication state provider, and then so when I right click to peep to the definition, you can see what this method shows. So go to the definition. So this is from an abstract class authentication state provider, which has got these events, these members, abstract task. It is returning an abstract task, get authentication async. And if you look into this, it will give you the summary. Asynchronously gets a Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.Components.Authorization.Authentication state that describes the current user. Okay. Now, if you come back and look into the other things, so authentication state.user, and now I have gone to authentication state class, which is a public class, and it has got a public user of claims principal type. And if you go and see the definition, go to the definition, what does that claims principal type holds? It implements iPrincipal interface, and it has got so many things. Add identity, and find all, find first, has claim, etc. is in role. Okay. So if you further go to this user manager.get user async, so that will be of type identity user. Let's see what this holds. Go to definition. So get user async. Now this is a member of the user manager, which implements iDisposable. So it has got all these details, all these member, logger, password, hasher, password, validators, and confirm email async, create async, find by email async, find by ID async. Okay, so lots of members are there in this user manager with the T users. So basically the idea is to show you that you can get all the details regarding the current logged in user from these few steps. Okay. So on this line of code, I am setting movie object dot owner ID, which we have just created earlier, to be set equal to the current user ID, which is a local variable of type. This is current user is that I have shown you this type. This is of a type identity user, ID property of the identity user, which Microsoft gets from the ASP.NET user, ASP.NET, the identity tables that it has automatically generated when you first migrated and did the update database with the project created by individual user accounts, right? And other parts of this methods will remain the same. The next thing I need to do is to open the services folder, and in this MovieDB service class I have to add another member to this interface, iMovieDB service. So below the delete movie, I'll start writing. This will also return a task, and this will be a list of movie. Task list of movie, and this will be known as get movies for user. A particular user with the owner ID or user ID string and then ID. Okay, this is the template, and this needs to be implemented. Angular brace, so I've removed that, so now everything is fine. Now I have to implement this, so I will implement this interface by writing code myself. So this will be a public async task, because this was of task of list movie, so I'll just copy this part, the signature, and within a pair of braces I will start writing. So this will be returning with an await statement. What this will return, it will again use the application DB context object underscore context await underscore context dot movies. Okay, dot, now this will be a iQueryable, or this is a query lambda expression. So M, you can write anything, any alphabets. So M dot, you can see M dot owner ID, that is the present context movies table, equals. Now this is the ID passed, equals the passed in argument ID dot to list async. So to list async, pair of braces and semicolon. So that's all. Now this new method is implemented in the MovieDB service class. Now next is I'll have to do some changes in the movies.razor, movies component, which is the parent component. So what are these? I have to write a method to call this newly added get movies for user to utilize here from the parent, and that method will be known as get user details. So I have again have it on my clipboard, and I will just paste, and for brevity, and I will just start explaining everything in that method. Okay, so I have now completed the get user details, and I have also added those namespaces using statements that I have added for movie details.razor. So they are system.data. Here it is, entity framework is being called, so I am using system.data.entity, and Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.Identity, and also authentication state provider object, authentication state provider, and a user manager type with identity user with an instance name as user manager. And in this method, what I am doing is I am just declaring the authentication state object as a field. So this will be authentication state. So this will be what this method is doing, get authentication state async. It is asynchronously getting an authentication state that describes the current user, and the user is auth state dot user property. Okay, so it gets it describes the current user basically. So if that user is authenticated, then the current user will become the user manager on identity user dot get user async. So it returns the user corresponding to the identity options dot claims identity dot user ID claim type claim in the principal. Okay, and then again I am getting current user ID is current user dot ID, and then I am calling this service dot get movies for user, which I have already described. So if you go to definition, this is taking me to the implementation. Okay, it is, I mean, asynchronously in the movies context, it is creating a SQL statement where with a where clause, it is getting the movies for that particular user with that owner ID, which is equal to the ID from the ASP.NET users table, right? So with all these, there is a couple of few changes, but I will run this application. I will just build this application to see everything is all right or not. So Ctrl+Shift+B. Now you can see that it doesn't find this system.data.entity namespace, for which I have to browse and install entity framework package. Okay, so let me find out entity framework, right, and install it. So accept. So entity framework is now installed, and that error has gone now. All right. Now the final steps are to use this get user detail, which is actually getting a user specific detail that we have analyzed now a few minutes back. So first of all, now instead of on save, which is a even callback, which was calling the refreshed method, now this will be replaced with the at get user detail. Now this is the get user detail methods. So I will call this method on save. Okay, and then on initialized async, instead of await on service.getMovies, which was getting the list, so I will await it on get user details. So await get user details. I'm calling asynchronously get user details to get the user details on when the page lifecycle starts, when the first time the components are initialized. Okay, and then finally get user details has to be called in the delete movie. So here you'll remove these two lines because that was awaiting on the get movies to get all the movies, and then the movie object was reinitialized to the new movie object. So this needs to be changed, and I will call the await, then get user details again. Now finally we will build the movie application again, Ctrl+Shift+B, and It's building. So build succeeded. Now in the next lecture, which is the pretty much the last of this section, we will give it a good running and testing the application with the new found functionality, newly added feature for authorization to view the profile data. So in this lecture, we have seen how to use the authorization and make the necessary changes for the users, the logged in users or authenticated users to view only their own profile data. So thereby ensuring data protection for each of the individual data so that they can view only their own private database, right?